Do you remember that 70s show? It was one of the biggest sitcoms of its time, but now one of its lead actors is in serious trouble. His downfall started years ago with a young woman named Chrissy. Chrissy was just 18 when she packed her bags and moved to Hollywood, chasing a dream so many before she had pursued, becoming an actress. She had no connections, no family nearby, just a head full of ambition and the belief that if she worked hard enough, she'd make it. In the beginning, things were slow. She picked up small acting gigs here and there, nothing big, but enough to keep her hopeful. She was figuring things out, learning the ropes, and trying to navigate a city that could either make or break you. Then, one night, everything changed. Chrissy went to a party, one of those typical Hollywood gatherings where everyone seemed to know everyone, where people casually name-dropped celebrities they had worked with, and where the air was thick with ambition and alcohol. That's where she met Danny. Danny was a few years older than her, and unlike Chrissy, he wasn't just starting out. He had been acting since he was a kid. He wasn't A-list famous, but he was well-connected, and to someone like Chrissy, he seemed successful, confident, and honestly, kind of charming. He had that Hollywood energy, someone who knew how to work a room, how to make people feel like they were the only person he was paying attention to. Chrissy was intrigued. Here was a guy who had already done what she was trying to do. He had experience, industry knowledge, and let's be real, she also found him attractive. They talked, they flirted, and by the end of the night, there was a clear connection. Things moved fast. Within days, they were seeing each other constantly. Danny showered her with attention, making her feel special in a city where it was easy to feel invisible. And then, just 2 weeks into their relationship, he made a bold offer: move in with me. For most people, that would seem crazy. 2 weeks? But for Chrissy, it felt like a lifeline. She was in a new city, barely knew anyone, and suddenly, here was someone offering her stability, protection, and a place to call home. So, she said yes. At first, everything seemed perfect. She was living with someone who understood the industry, who could guide her. But then, Danny brought up something she wasn't expecting. If we're going to be together, you have to join my religion, he told her. Chrissy didn't know much about Scientology, but she knew it was a big deal in Hollywood. Some of the biggest names in the industry were part of it. She didn't see any harm in checking it out. After all, what was the worst that could happen? But what she didn't realize was that this wasn't just about faith. It was about control. And once she was in, getting out wouldn't be so easy. At first, Chrissy didn't think much of it. She started attending church meetings, signing documents, and taking Scientology courses, fully immersing herself in the religion. But soon, it became clear that this wasn't just about faith. This was control. The church and Danny became her entire world. They dictated how she should live, act, and even who she could associate with. She was told to cut off contact with friends and family who weren't members. Wanting to be a good partner, she obeyed. By 1998, Danny's life changed in a way that most struggling actors could only dream of. He landed a role on a new sitcom originally titled Teenage Wasteland. No one knew it at the time, but this show would soon become a cultural phenomenon under its new name, That 70s Show. Almost overnight, Danny went from being just another Hollywood actor to a household name. The show was a massive success, drawing millions of viewers every week, and suddenly, he had everything: fame, fortune, industry connections. And with that success came power. But power can be dangerous in the wrong hands. As Danny's celebrity status skyrocketed, so did his influence within the Church of Scientology. He became one of their rising stars, a high-ranking member in an organization known for protecting its own. And with both Hollywood and Scientology behind him, he started to believe he was untouchable. His relationship with Chrissy took a dark turn. At first, It was subtle, small things that she brushed off as normal relationship conflicts. He would criticize the way she spoke, the way she dressed, the way she carried herself in public. It wasn't outright abusive, but it chipped away at her confidence. Then, it escalated. Danny became more controlling, dictating who she could talk to, where she could go, and what she could do. If she disagreed with him, he'd twist the situation to make it seem like she was the problem. And because Chrissy had cut ties with her friends and family, just as Scientology had encouraged, she had no one to turn to. Danny was all she had. And then, the emotional manipulation turned physical. It started with small outbursts, grabbing her wrist a little too hard, raising his voice in a way that made her shrink inside herself. But each time, he would brush it off. It was just a bad day. She was overreacting. He didn't mean it. Chrissy hated what was happening. She knew this wasn't how love was supposed to feel. But she had convinced herself that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Because if she admitted the truth, that the man she had built her life around was hurting her, what would she have left? By 2001, Chrissy had been with Danny for several years, and things had only gotten worse. His control over her was suffocating, his outbursts more frequent, and his behavior more disturbing. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened one night in their home. She remembers having a single glass of wine, just one. But almost immediately, something felt off. Her head swam, her body felt heavy, and a wave of dizziness washed over her. This wasn't normal. She hadn't had enough to feel this way. Before she could process what was happening, everything went black. The next morning, she woke up feeling sick and disoriented. Her body ached in ways that didn't make sense, and then she noticed something even more alarming. She was bleeding. Panic set in as she tried to piece together what had happened. But the night before was a complete blur. She stumbled downstairs, still weak, and confronted Danny. "What happened last night?" she asked. Danny just laughed. "We had sex," he said, like it was nothing. Chrissy felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong. "Was I awake?" she asked, her voice shaking. He smirked. "Nope." It hit her like a truck. The man she had trusted, the man she lived with, the man she had defended for years, had violated her in the worst way possible. And he wasn't even remotely sorry. She wanted to scream, to run, to tell someone, so she did. But instead of going to the police, she turned to the only authority figure she thought could help, the Church of Scientology. Danny was a high-ranking member, but surely, they would see how wrong this was. Surely, they would protect her. She went to the ethics department, the church's version of a justice system, and reported what had happened. But instead of support, she was met with cold indifference. "That's not assault," they told her. "He's your boyfriend," and then, they turned it on her. "If this happened to you, it's because you did something to deserve it." Chrissy was stunned. The very people who were supposed to help her were blaming her. And it didn't stop there. She was warned. If she took this outside of the church, if she went to the police, she would be labeled an enemy of Scientology. And the church didn't just cut off their enemies, they destroyed them. Suddenly, Chrissy wasn't just afraid of Danny. She was afraid of an entire organization with limitless resources, powerful connections, and a reputation for silencing people who spoke out. So, she made a choice. She stayed quiet. Then came the warning: if she went to the police, she would be labeled an enemy of the church. And if that happened, they would do whatever it took to destroy her life. Chrissy was terrified. She had heard the stories. Scientology was known for ruthlessly going after people who crossed them. On top of that, the church had deep connections within Hollywood and even with law enforcement. She felt trapped. So instead of going to the police, she stayed silent. Eventually, she did manage to leave Danny. Years passed, and by 2009, Chrissy had started a new chapter. She met a musician named Cedric, the lead singer of the Mars Volta, and at the drive-in, they fell in love, got married, and for the first time in years, Chrissy felt safe. One day, she opened up to Cedric about her past. She told him everything that had happened with Danny, but she blamed herself, saying it was her fault. Cedric immediately stopped her. He told her in no uncertain terms, this was not her fault. What happened to her was a crime. For the first time in years, Chrissy felt truly heard. Cedric didn't question her, didn't dismiss her pain, he believed her. And that changed everything. With his support, she finally found the courage to do what she had been too afraid to do for so long. She went to the police. She filed a report, detailing everything Danny had done to her. But she didn't stop there. Chrissy also took to social media, calling out Danny by name and exposing the Church of Scientology's role in covering up his crimes. And then, something shocking happened. 2 more women came forward. Their stories were disturbingly similar to Chrissy's. How Danny had drugged them, how they lost consciousness, how they woke up in pain, confused and violated. The details of what he had done were so horrific that they couldn't even be shared publicly without being censored. And then more women spoke out. At this point, the police had no choice but to take action. They launched an official investigation, digging into Danny's past, interviewing witnesses, and collecting evidence. And finally, after years of getting away with it, Danny was arrested. As the case moved forward, Chrissy quickly realized that speaking out against Danny, and, more importantly, against Scientology, came at a cost. Almost immediately, strange things started happening. At first, it was subtle. She and Cedric would notice the same cars following them, parked just down the street or appearing in their rearview mirror no matter where they went. Then, it escalated. Strangers would stand outside their houses, watching. Sometimes they would come up to the windows and just stare inside. The threats started rolling in, too. Messages online, phone calls, comments that made it clear someone was watching them. Some were vague, but others were terrifyingly direct. People warning that their children would be taken away, that they would regret what they had done. And then, one day, Chrissy was driving when a car suddenly sped up behind her, swerved into her lane, and tried to force her off the road. At that point, it was clear, this wasn't paranoia. This wasn't just online harassment. This was real. Terrified, Chrissy and Cedric made the difficult decision to leave California. They packed up their lives and moved to Texas, hoping that some distance would finally give them peace. But the harassment followed them. One afternoon, Chrissy looked outside and saw 2 men standing by her fence. One of them smirked and casually said, "Nice dogs." Days later, one of their dogs was found dead, poisoned. Someone had taken raw meat, stuffed it with rat poison, and left it where the dog would find it. Not long after, their other dog also died under mysterious circumstances, its throat showing unexplained trauma. Chrissy and Cedric were devastated. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to scare them anymore, they were making it clear that nothing, not even their pets, was safe. But despite the fear, despite the relentless intimidation, Chrissy refused to back down. Danny went to trial, not once, but twice. The first trial ended in a deadlock, but in the second, the jury found him guilty of 2 counts of assault. And finally, after decades of getting away with it, Danny Masterson was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. Justice had finally been served, but the dark influence of Scientology still loomed over the case. Chrissy and the other survivors had risked everything to tell their stories, and in doing so, they exposed the terrifying power that the church held over its members. Danny Masterson had fallen from grace, but the real question is, how many more stories like this have been buried? And how much longer will Scientology continue to protect its own at the expense of its victims? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.